Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, sure. For the record.
Do you remember the first time you heard an alert?
I do. That was in a town near Vinica that we stayed one night, but the alert was very, very distant. So I don't really remember the time. It was much dissociated, I can say this. Like it was very stressful, all that journey to the west of Ukraine. But the hearing an alert like in very loudly was when we got back to Kiev, and there was that loud alert, and I heard it for the first time, and it was terrifying. It was very scary that time. It was like the first time I contracted, and it was awful. We were on the bus train station, like, and train station could be actually a military or not a military object as a target of strike. But in some time we realized that everything and everyone is a target.
Balakun, a bridge to Ukraine. Join the conversation at balakun.org.
Балакун – міст в Україну. Приєднуйтесь до наших розмов на www.balakun.org.
So, hi everyone. Today we're having a very special episode, and I won't say that it will be funny at all. We'll have to make it optimistic as life goes on. But this week is 10 years when Russia invaded Ukraine, and 2 years of the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War. And we're recording it on the 22nd of February 2024, and a couple of days has passed after 10 years of war, and the day after tomorrow we'll have the second anniversary of the full-scale invasion. So today we'll share some memories, think of and talk about some prerequisites and all the breakpoints that we had in this harsh time.
Hello. While I will read what I have prepared, hopefully with time I will be able to speak without text. The story of our evacuation from our home. I and the child, my daughter Alice, boarded the evacuation train. We reached Lviv. From there, Polish buses took people to the nearest refugee center, and then they helped us find a family in a village in the center of Poland. We spent 3 wonderful months with this family and returned to Ukraine to my husband. During our absence, the husband evacuated our animals, 2 dogs and 2 cats, all 4 animals, to the center of Ukraine. Unfortunately, we cannot return home because the front line is too close to our home. We currently live in a rented house in Dnipro region.
Couple of days ago, I've seen this video on YouTube made by Rahulivna, and she referred to the interview of the former KGB agent, an interview at American television. He escaped Soviet Union and he gave that interview, and he told about 4 stages of invasion, of ideological and psychological invasion or taking over another country.
This interview took place in 1984, and the agent defected from a position in the Russian Embassy of India before moving to the US.
I don't know whether he's honest or dishonest, but it comes like this. The first stage of taking over another nation or another country is demoralization. The first stage takes from 15 to 20 years. During this stage, the very core beliefs and very core logics is spread into minds of people. The second one is destabilization. After a nation is demoralized, it can be destabilized in any position. Then the crisis. The crisis is even easier than destabilization, because when everyone is demoralized and destabilized, it can be just a splash, just a spark, and everything will burst out. And then normalization. And normalization is the phase of taking over. He referred to, I'll just quote him, "Normalization is a cynical expression of Soviet propaganda. After all, even when Soviet tanks entered Czechoslovakia in 1968, Brezhnev said, now things are normalized here." And this scheme he referred to, he was talking about, was a scheme applied to United States of America. Like he claimed that American nation was being demoralized for years and destabilized. But this same thing we can apply to what happened to Ukraine. We had that Soviet background. Everyone was very demoralized. Human being and human itself didn't cost anything. Any human being was considered as a part of something bigger, of the greater good, and it doesn't matter what you want or who you are. You don't have your own property. You don't have your belongings. You are just a part of a society, and society what mattered. That was the main agenda.
Individuals had no value, but collectively you worked for the betterment of the state.
For that ghost of communism. And we had that background. So many people just had no belief in themselves. They had no belief in their value and their meaning. When the Soviet Union broke, the uprising of Ukrainian nation started, but it was demoralized by this scheme, by this particular scheme for years. First, in 90s, there were a lot of Ukrainian music, Ukrainian cinema, but in some time, it became less and less and less. When YouTube started, we watched Russian YouTube, as it was very interesting, and very little was produced in Ukrainian for Ukrainians. And even if something was produced in Ukraine, it was produced in Russian, so to be sold in Russia. And that was beyond the commercial part. It was this demoralization part. So everyone was, not everyone, but the majority was sure that despite we have 2 different countries, Ukraine and Russia, we had common history, common language, common music, common cinema, And that was this part of demoralization. And also there was this notion or this understanding of common history. And this common history propaganda was that strong that people and children in schools were taught this, like naming not the Second World War, but the Great Patriotic War. And the dates were not from 1939 till 1945, but from 1941 to 1945. And it was commemorated on the 9th of May, not on the 8th of May, like all the rest of the world commemorated it. So that was the part of propaganda. And I really remember when I was a child, we had these parades, we had this cult of victory and everything that goes around it. The propaganda was so strong that it was like it was programmed, and it was the core beliefs and core codes in people's minds. And there is actually a very big difference between never again and we can repeat it. So Russia, for the last years, they made it, made their motto on that parades, we can repeat it. And the rest of the world told never again. What we had and how society formed. And the main thing that KGB agent also said, that on demoralization stage, when you are demoralized, you won't believe until you are thrown to that concentration camp. I think that same thing happened to us. We couldn't believe that we would be invaded by Russia. Like we had very much of common, and we just seem to have very much in common, actually. We traded a lot, we had this cultural assimilation, and all that steps were taken on purpose to make us believe that we have much in common, that we are the same. The other thing of this demoralization and this propaganda story, as we spoke on our very first episode about perceptions, like Ukraine was perceived as a part of Russia, and everyone thought that's their local problem. They would deal by themselves. The Second World War, everyone understood that United Kingdom and Germany are different countries.
So today's news is
over 400 cities to join Stand With Ukraine global rally. Over 400 cities will hold peaceful rallies and events as part of the UWS Stand With Ukraine global advocacy campaign, marking the second anniversary of Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the war that has lasted for 10 years. Rallies will take place on February 24th. The largest number of events is planned in Europe and North America. In addition, actions will take place in United Arab Emirates, India, Thailand, South Korea, Japan, Peru, Brazil, and Argentina. The Ukrainian World Congress and Ukrainska Pravda, a leading Ukrainian media outlet, have developed an interactive map outlining countries, cities, location, dates, and times of the global rally planned for February 24th, 2024. And I think that we will add the link to description of this episode, so everyone could check the places, their city, and the map, and probably join this rally. The main objective of the Stand with Ukraine campaign is to raise awareness about the ongoing Russian war on Ukraine among global civil society, media, world leaders, and governments. The campaign highlights the necessity for increased global support for Ukraine during the ongoing brutal war. The first attempt of annexation of Ukrainian territory happened 20 years ago. On the 29th of September 2003, without any warning, Russia began constructing a causeway to Tuzla to connect the island to the Russian shore. The act of hybrid Russian aggression against Ukraine focused on the small but strategically important island of Tuzla, located in the middle of the Kerch Strait between the Black Sea and Azov Sea. The island was formed in 1925 after a severe storm endured the narrow spit of land that extended into the strait from the Taman Peninsula on the eastern side. Soviet authorities ruled that the island of Tuzla belonged to the Crimean Oblast, which became the part of Ukraine. After Ukraine declared its independence, the island, along with all of Crimea, became the integral part of Ukraine's sovereign territory. On September 29, 2003, without any warning, Russia began constructing a causeway to Tuzla to connect the island to the Russian shore. The entire arsenal of Russian state propaganda was launched against Ukraine and its government on the international arena, claiming that Tuzla is not legally an island and that is supposedly Russian territory that has never been part of Crimea and therefore did not form part of Ukraine in 1991. The conflict over the island was also used by the Russian leadership to officially challenge Ukraine's claims to its waters in the Azov Sea and the Kerch Strait. Moscow also used the opportunity to study the reaction of Ukraine and the international community to respond to Russia's encroachment on sovereign Ukrainian territory. In response to Russia's aggressive actions, Ukraine dispatched a unit of border guards to Tuzla Island, followed by a visit by then President Leonid Kuchma, who announced military exercises in the waters of the Kerch Peninsula. Kuchma later admitted that those events opened his eyes to the aggressive nature of Putin's Russia. So that was the pre-war attempt. Russia wanted to see how we reacted and are they allowed or not to take advantage of Ukrainian territory. So that was the first attempt to invade Ukraine. After that, silent invasion or non-military invasion started. We had that 5-column, I can see this in Ukrainian government. We had that Mr. Yanukovych as president and a bunch of agents, of Russian agents in government. Like the leader of our special service was a Russian citizen. And there were a lot of Russians in all the parts of the government, starting with pro-Russian Yanukovych and ending with all the local special service offices. And I can say that that was the other part of demoralization. There were some discussions about making Russian the second language. Cultural invasion also. So that was invasion on several dimensions without army invasion that time. Without using military, without using force, without using fire. And it was very, very effective. But after that, we chose European path, and revolution and dignity happened to get away from Moscow. I think that was the point on which that silent invasion or non-military invasion somehow stopped. And after silent invasion stopped, an actual invasion started.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting back to events that of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that time I was in Crimea. So there were Russian tanks and Russian troops in Crimea. And everyone was talking about it. Like, what happened? What was that? What is going to be? And no one understood what was happening actually.
How did they get there?
There was a base, a military base in Sevastopol. It was part of Black Sea fleet of Russia. I think that this was prepared for a very long time. And they name the reuniting, like they say it, reuniting Crimea with Russia in March. But actually, it happened in February, like their medal tells, and there were already some military guys, Ukrainian military guys, that broke their oath and joined Russian military. So that prerequisites worked for them, and there were many traitors that took the side of Russia. As it was a lot of propaganda around revolution. They were talking about that Russian language would be banned, that if you spoke Russian, you would be killed, and so on. I think that having that silent invasion, they didn't have to make this
Military invasion.
military invasion. They already had us that time. What meant the most is they had our minds.
Well, not yours.
Not everyone's, but the majority. So that demoralization phase, they succeeded in it a lot. Not for everyone, but for majority.
Yeah.
So that was the invasion to Crimea. And that invasion, many people said that it was peaceful annexation, but no one talks about the amount of people who just disappeared. The amount of people who were imprisoned. And no one talks about the number of people who had to flee. And actually, a lot of people fled from Crimea at that time, becoming displaced persons in Ukraine, and were replaced with people from Russia. And the population of Crimea changed from that time. But it was the first invasion, like the first phase. In the instability in Ukraine itself, like there was much that wasn't obvious, that wasn't very clear what was happening and who was in charge of the country. They took advantage and took Crimea. And it's really hard for me to talk about it, really. Just every time while preparing to talk about it, I think, oh, I know everything. I was there. I can talk much about it. And when it comes to terms, when I talk to it, I'm just a bit muted because I cannot find right words or overcome my emotions about it. So that's a really hard one.
Let's talk about the little green men.
So the little green man appeared from a sudden. Like no one knew who they were, but everyone did. Everyone knew that they were either Russian militaries or traitors.
Mm-hmm.
That green man were of the different disguise. Like they were from the eastern parts of or central eastern parts of Russia. They have very different appearance. Speaking very little Russian, very bad Russian,
Right.
and pretended to be that they are just self-defense, Crimea self-defense troops in some uniform. Some uniform without badges. That time, Ukrainian army didn't have that uniform like it has now. I think so. It was a little bit different. So no one would recognize it. And actually, people didn't know what was the uniform. Everyone lived in peace. Everyone didn't know that was Ukrainian or Russian uniform. It's just uniform. So no one really understood what happened.
Were they everywhere in Crimea or just at military bases?
They were definitely in the capital of Crimea, in the capital city of Crimea, in Simferopol. I myself witnessed how they pulled off Ukrainian flag and put Russian flag instead. And that was in February, in late February. So it wasn't after so-called referendum. There were some concerts that time, like in Simferopol. There was a concert that was called Russian Spring. It was meant to be the ethnic festival, but it turned to be a political one and invasional one. And the day after that, there was a big gathering of people by it was Verkhovna Rada of Crimea, Parliament of Crimea. And by that parliament, many of people gathered and with Ukrainian flags, and they were very pro-Ukrainian. There were a lot of Crimean Tatars there. And there was a big fight. That date was on the 26th of February. But in that time, many of the military bases or the military points in Crimea were already taken over. Some of them were still holding Ukrainian flag, but many were already occupied.
So for me, it all began in 2014. I wasn't actually home. I was on vacation in Berdyansk, famous Berdyansk. You know it now, but I know it from my childhood. Since 12 years old, I was going there every summer and spending time there. It's my actually favorite town in Ukraine. Favorite city is probably Donetsk, and then Kyiv is on the second place. But what happened with Donetsk after 2014 is just, it disappeared. It stopped being itself, and it became just a ghost of that amazing city that was very developing and very advanced, I would say, because it was just like Kyiv back then. After that, it went back in time, and these days it's just like 1970s there, I think. Maybe even further back in time. Further back. That construction is kind of ridiculous in terms of English, I know, but that's how it happens there. So yeah, it all began in 2014 when I was in Berdansk. Some military action started happening also in Makivka, where I'm from, and I decided to stay there in Berdansk to wait a few weeks until it all ends, because it all felt like we will have a quick victory over the separatism, and that our forces will get rid of all, all the invaders, because they had some success in Slovyansk already then, and it was all going good. So we thought, okay, just a few weeks. 2 weeks passed, and we decided to go then to Sidovo, which is also a village on the coast of Azov Sea, very close to the Russian border, close to Novoazovsk, even closer to the border than Novoazovsk. So in Sidovo, we spent another 3 weeks, but the war wasn't ending. And we decided that we should go to the western part of Ukraine, to Khmelnytsky Oblast, where a relative of our family lived. And we went there and we spent around 3 months there. I started looking for a job there, but it was pretty tough, pretty hard for me to find it. I was a automatic system security, no, not security, firefighting systems, automatic firefighting systems in many facilities in Kyiv, including, for example, Kyiv's Aqua Park. We were managing those systems. It was an interesting job, I must say. And yeah, so I was trying to find some job by my profession there in Khmelnytsky and the Rivne regions, but there was no good result. I had no offers. I was struggling to find myself a place to work for about 2 or 3 months even, but there was no good result. So, and also we had our cat, me and my wife. We weren't married back then, but we already lived together, and we had 2 cats who were practically abandoned there in Makivka. Like, the active military action already was ending. It was around November 2014, and we decided to go back because people were coming back already, and everything was kind of quiet there. I mean, back then in the end of 2014 in Makivka, they stopped the shelling, so it seemed pretty calm. We came back then, and we were living there for the next 4.5 years, as I've told you. So this was not like a displacement to us anymore. So we kind of came back, right? But it still felt like we're not living where we lived before, because it really wasn't Makivka and Donetsk anymore. But this was not the end. In 2019, I think it was back in 2018, I started realizing that nothing good is waiting for me there. There are no perspectives. There's no future for us there, because it's only stagnation and degradation also happening there. In terms of everything, in terms of economics too, and I was working as a salesman of electronics and PC builder there in occupation. I was really enjoying the job, especially the PC building, and I wanted to, develop there in that profession. I wanted to build a better, bigger PCs, and more advanced, and there was no chance to do it there because, you know, first of all, there were no clients who were willing to pay the money for some super advanced computers, and they just wanted to buy something, usually something as cheap as possible, but for gaming. You know, the most common question there is when people are coming into the store and asking, "What can you offer me the cheapest that can run this game?" So it was basically like that, and I decided that I need to go to some city that is. That has clients that can offer me some development, and I I didn't even think of what direction I should move. It was Kyiv, so I went here, but I stopped working on that profession because I needed a job fast, and there was an offer from a gaming company, and I started working as a gaming tester, you know, QA engineer. So it was another displacement for me. I started to live from the scratch. Well, my life from the scratch, yes. And then in 2019, it was pretty hard because as a beginner, as a junior QA engineer, I earned so little. I won't even say how much, but I was barely um, living for those money. It was enough just to pay for the rent and for the basic food. I cannot even afford myself good food for the first year, I think. Yeah, it was pretty rough. But then I started settling, and then when I think I just found a new job and I started some, yeah, some um, optimism started rising on the horizon for me. In 2 days, full-scale invasion began, and I was displaced again because when we were sitting in Kyiv, and then just 1 or 200 meters from us, a rocket came into the building that was pretty famous there in Kyiv. I think you can remember about, you know, one rocket that is getting right through the tall building in Kyiv, the famous one. It was pretty close to us. Yeah, it was pretty close to us. It was pretty loud and scary, and we decided that, you know, in the first days of full-scale invasion, it was so uncertain what's going to happen because Russians already poured into Kyiv and a few of tanks. Of course, the biggest number of them were stopped before Kyiv, but they came in, some of them, and this was really scary and uncertain. And we decided to run to the western part of Ukraine. A friend of ours was living there already because they were relocating with a husband. They were relocating to the western part of Ukraine before the full-scale invasion, like a week before. Many companies here in Ukraine, especially IT companies, they started thinking about displacing people or relocating them, to be precise, to the western part of Ukraine or out of Ukraine before, like 2 or 3 weeks before the full-scale invasion. And yeah, so they were there. We decided to go there. Yeah, because actually, I would say, you know, that in the first days of full-scale invasion, millions of people were traveling there, and they to the western part. And so the roads were overflown with cars, and it was really slow to move through the highways here in Ukraine, especially the main ones. So it took 2 days to move there, but we didn't get there. We actually were stopping in Lviv region. Oh, but yeah, actually, it was pretty close to the region that we were moving, but we spent then 2.5 months in my friend's who is also a volunteer and famous on my channel. Yeah, her grandpa actually sheltered us there for 2.5 months. We are very grateful to him and to her for that. So we spent 2.5 months living there, and then when Russians were dropped off the Kyiv region, when they were pushed out by our army, we decided to come back. We came back. We found ourselves a new apartment, but already in the first few months, I changed completely. But I also realized one of the things I realized already then is that probably I should not run anymore, and I am actually dedicated to stay here in Kyiv. I mean, situation right now on the front lines, it seems pretty much critical right now, and if we won't break it now with multiplying the number of FPV drones, then this might be something critical. And who knows, if everything goes bad, of course I don't believe it, but you got to believe in good, in the best, but prepare for the worst. So I am thinking that, yeah, if Russians are coming close to Kyiv again, which I don't believe in, but anyway, I am not planning to go anywhere because that's enough of displacement for me.
So after these years, that was the phase called full scale. I can call it pre-full scale. The world was very aware of it. All the intelligences told that there would be invasion. All the embassies were evacuated from Kyiv. For about 2 or 3 months, many people told that there's going to be a war. There's going to be a war. So everyone were taught to have this go bag, what to put there. Everyone was many people talked about the importance of having this first aid, medical first aid courses, to know how to provide this first aid to fellow people. I realized that there would be war, but I didn't realize the scale of it.
When did you realize?
The final understanding that it happened, it has already started, was on the 21st of February, when there was Putin's speech on recognition of Donbass, of Donetsk and Luhansk People Republic, or whatever. That was the understanding that it has started. But a couple of days before that, I remember having a walk and having that understanding that it is going to happen. But I thought that it would be a full-scale war, not full-scale war, but obvious war in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that they would be shelling other cities of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And having this understanding that it already happened and it already started, I actually did nothing that day. And in the morning of the 24th of February, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I received that call from a friend who is military, who told me, gather your stuff and go to the western part of Ukraine. the war has started. Days before that, I read much about it, about what could happen, what might happen. And there was that phrase, the expression that told, if you are not in military, just don't distract them. Just stay away and don't distract them. Let them do their job. And that was the main thing at the first days. Not to interfere, not to make them do it harder. I didn't manage to leave for the western part of Ukraine that days. Me and my friends, we went to the village, to my friends' parents, to the eastern part of, to the east from Kiev. And we spent 3 weeks there until we knew that Russian troops were in the second village to the village we were in. And that time we decided to go to the western part of Ukraine. It was rather hard to find right road, right path, as on the northern western part were Russian troops already. Northern western part is Bucha and Rostomel. And we have chosen that path that would be safe, or at least conditionally safe. And we spent 2 days riding to the western part. It was very stressful ride. There were very many checkpoints. And that was the funny story, that on one checkpoint we rode through the villages, and approaching one of the checkpoints in some village, there were a group of men on the checkpoint. Like they were not military, they were just the inhabitants of that village. They had guns, maybe some non-military guns, like hunting guns,
Hunting rifles.
yeah, and hunting rifles. And while we were approaching them, they pointed that guns on us. That was very scary. We felt safe. We were between our people.
Yeah.
And I remember the very first day of coming to that village, the only thing that was in my mind, I was very focused that time. I was banned from all the emotions. I was very firm and concentrated. And the only thing that sounded in my mind or rolled in my mind was Ukrainian anthem. I don't know why, but it was the only thing that was in my mind, and constantly on the repeat, like it was some soundtrack, or I had it in my headphones. It was just in my head at the very first day. So in that 3 weeks, we went to the western part of Ukraine, and we tried to do what we could do some domestic volunteering, donating. So what could we do that time? And in May, we already returned back to Kiev. That was my personal story. And non-personal story that just the general story is that first days were very uneven for many people. Were very not frustrating, were very scary to everyone. Like no one knew what would happen. And that time, the Ukrainian society, as we have this ability, we united that much. There were no such unity for centuries.
I remember I woke up on the morning of the 24th of February, 2022, and my phone was just going mad with notifications about what was happening. And kind of my first reaction was kind of sort of this is not happening. Like there's no, this can't be real. And it was just like the sort of the horror of what was going on, of you know, reading about the attacks all across Ukraine, but in particular in places where I had friends and family. It was a real, yeah, I mean, it was a real shock, I think, obviously to me and to most people. You know, sort of just trying to coordinate what was just trying to coordinate in my head sort of what actually is happening here, like what is the point, what is going on. And yeah, it was a very difficult time, obviously, because nobody knew where this was going to be. Nobody knew what the point of this was. And obviously, even now, we are still, you know, the Ukraine is still suffering under this. But on that day itself, the first thing I did was I just wrote to everybody, just basically asking, are you okay? Are you all right? Is everybody fine? And I decided pretty early on that I was going to close the school for a short period of time, for two reasons. One, obviously, students have got no desire to be learning English when there's missiles and bombs and Russian soldiers everywhere. But also as well because I wanted to do something to help within this, and so I decided that would be a better use of my time. So I contacted a Ukrainian news organization, Svidomi, to ask if they needed any help, and they did. And so for the first few days, I was working as a volunteer translator and proofreader for the news in English, so that people can know, so that the world can know what was happening in Ukraine. And for the first 3 days, I didn't sleep at all. I didn't get a single wink of sleep because there was just so much happening, and I decided that the soldiers don't get to sleep, so neither do I. Basically, was kind of my sort of my thought process. And yeah, I was just trying to help as much as I could, just trying to get sort of as much of the news into English as I possibly could. And I was also trying to also coordinate. I also helped to coordinate some cars as well for people who were. I had a few students in Kyiv who were trying to leave, and so I organized for them to meet up, and then they all got into one car and drove to the border. And so basically, my whole experience was just trying to help as much as I could during this process. But it was a really awful time, because at that time, I mean, you know, the Russians were obviously that they captured large parts of Ukraine, which is still under occupation. They were getting close to Kyiv at that point, and it was a really, yeah. I when I think about it now, it still feels like it still feels like a traumatic experience, just because I'd never experienced anything like that before, and you know, it was a really horrible time to go through, as it was.
Sounds completely unreal.
Yeah. It really was. It was, I mean, and it was also, I think kind of the shock of it as well was also because there were also the attacks in areas that people presumably thought was safe previously anyway, because like in Lutsk, for example, there's a military airfield which was hit in the morning of the first day of the attack, which is, you know, a hell of a long way from Russia. There were also strikes in Ivano-Frankivsk and Lviv, and obviously in the west. And I think at that point, it was just so unexpected that it was going to be sort of as wide scale as it was, the full scale invasion. And yeah, it was Yeah, it was a very challenging time, and obviously it still is. But Ukraine is still here. It still stands, and yeah, it always will. They can attack, they can bomb, but they can never destroy the Ukrainian people, and that's never going to happen.
So I just wanted to share two stories from the first days of full-scale invasion as we were traveling to Lviv Oblast through Khmelnytsky Oblast. Our car got broken. We stopped and we couldn't really jumpstart again. So we met a guy who was just traveling through the highways and helping people to repair their cars. He's a car mechanic, and he was like for the first days, for the first week, he was traveling around Khmelnytsky highways and just stopping and helping people. So we actually managed to jumpstart it and come to his home, to his garage, and his family fed us. His family cuddled us, with warmth of their home, and they really, it was so touching. He didn't want to take money for the car repair, and so he did it for free. I'm so grateful, and I was back then. There was, I think, one of the. This was a revelation for me, to be honest. I never thought before. I mean, I knew people like him, but it was something like a discovery for me. Then I realized that people in Ukraine are different. They are not like Russians who are only thinking about themselves. As I must say, a lot of their in culture in the eastern part, at least in my surrounding, was more like that than like this Ukrainian way. I was raised, not all of the people were like me there, but I was raised as I would say more like think for yourself and about yourself person than help others. Like you first, like you got to think about yourself. And I could have just walked past some people in critical situations and needs. But luckily, I've changed. And this was one of the examples that opened my eyes and made me realize that people are different and I should be more like them.
Yeah, and this proverb or saying that "Moja chata z kraju," my house beside, is not actually about Ukrainians. It's more about Russians.
It's about Russians. That's it. Yeah. So the second story is just like yours. When we were sheltered, the same day we came to Vinnytsia, just like you to Vinnytsia region. We came there and we stayed in the Artinov. This place is called. It is a co-working, but also like a anti-cafe on the first floor. Amazing place. So we were the first. How do you call displaced people, or тимчасові переселенці, we call them here in Ukraine. So we were just first to visit their shelter. It was the third day of full-scale invasion. They made us the tastiest borscht I've ever tried in my life, to be honest. Of course, it was the tastiest after 20 hours of ride. I think that's why, but still, they were so welcoming, so caring. They fed us. They provided us like a sofas to stay because they weren't meant to take people, for like to live there. But now we have 200 people living in here, and I just how can 200 people fit in there? This was crazy. But yeah, a lot of they sheltered a lot of people, so a huge shout out to Artinov in Vinnytsia region. They are just amazing. So yeah, that's just two examples of many examples that of those, help to your citizen kind of stories.
Fun fact.
Historical record. Ukrainians opened the largest number of entrepreneurships in the second year of the war. The second year of the Great War seemed difficult for our country, and probable scenarios of the development of the events at the front predict a long-term war and life in conditions of lack of clear planning. Despite all the difficulties, Ukrainians, including Ukrainian entrepreneurs, continue to show proactivity and resilience. According to the results of research conducted using their Your Control market tool, it was found that during the second year of this full-scale war, Ukrainians opened a record number of entrepreneurships over the last decade, almost 315,000, and the number of newly created companies increased by 60% compared to the figures in 2022. And among companies, the field of construction has grown significantly. Starting with the first days, we had so many memes from that time. We had so many jokes, and those jokes starting to appear at the very first days, actually.
Yeah.
That's also one of the
coping mechanism. Make memes.
Yeah, like coping mechanism. I think it's great, actually.
Yeah, it's cool.
So that's just who we are. We're joking on that points that no one would joke.
Yeah.
We have tragedy around us, but we are still joking. We have this life threat, but we are joking and we are laughing. That's one of the peculiarities of Ukrainian nation.
Yeah.
And in that first days, we realized, and many things told that there was that myth about second world greatest army or third greatest army in the world, or second one. I don't really remember which one they call themselves.
It was constantly called the Second Army of the World.
Yeah, second army of the world, and everyone in the world realized they weren't. They thought, and it was their strong belief, that they would invade Ukraine, change government in Kiev in 3 days, and have this parade on Khreshchatyk, on our main street in the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And that's so arrogant, that's so self-assured. They were so self-assured that they didn't even prepare much. Before full-scale invasion started, we were provided with military aid to have this partisan war. We were not provided with right ammunition or right arms. We were provided with to make this war partisan-like. So I think that that countries that provided us with military aid thought that Ukraine would fall, and there would be some partisans who would fight back. So that they gave us NLAWs and javelins, but the things turned out differently. We fought them back. We are still fighting. And I don't think we'll stop. So that was the first time of the full scale. After that, things just started to not calm down, but become usual. Death became usual. Victims became usual. And there became a lot of threats, like nuclear bombs threat, nuclear explosion on Zaporizhia nuclear plant, the threat of second invasion on Kiev, involving Belarusian army to that, and the threats are just very constant. And from time to time, there are new and new threats. And this, I can say that it is another dimension of the war. It's informational war. And this informational war, sometimes Russia takes advantage in it. They are using that world proxies, like these useful idiots from different countries. They use far lefts and far rights to spit out their agenda and to prevent the governments of different countries to give military aid or financial aid to Ukraine. Let's get to our numbers. I have gathered some statistics. So the first one is air raid alerts since 24th February 2022. The sum of the duration of all the alerts throughout all the regions of Ukraine is 2,555 days, 11 hours and 48 minutes. The total amount of alerts is 33,945. Since 24th of February 2022, the media reports about explosions is 9,193 reports. So that's the amount that of the explosions that are reported at media. It's only what was reported. The total amount of alerts is 997. The total duration is 47 days and 5 minutes. And the average alert duration is 1 hour and 7 minutes. And the longest one is 6 hours and 51 minutes. And media reports about explosions is 157. That are the numbers of alerts. I looked into the reports of Come Back Alive Foundation. They raised $315 million. And speaking of Ukraine United 24, like government foundation, they collected $604 million. For today, for the 22nd of February 2024, so according to the General Staff of the military of Ukraine. The total, the information is the total combat losses of the enemy. The personnel is approximately 407,240 people, 6,523 tanks, 12,373 APV, 9,867 artillery system, 997 multiple rocket launchers, 680 anti-aircraft warfare systems, 339 aircraft, 325 helicopters, 7,596 operational drones, 1903 or 1,903 cruise missiles, 25 boats or cutters, 12,924 vehicles, 1,566 special equipment, and 1 submarine. So that are the tremendous losses of our enemy, and still they won't stop. I don't know how much would it take for them just to stop. Okay.
And you know what I think? I think that that experience of unity will help to us in the future. I have this strong feeling that it will help, because such type of experience, it's it's affect very deeply. I have this feelings. And as Vitaly said, like when full-scale invasion started, I personally I freeze it, because I react on the stress like opossum. I'm freezing. And when I saw how Ukrainians looking for ways to help Ukrainian army, and I understood that we have actually the ways to survive, and it helps me to unfreeze and move on, because I saw reactions, I saw actions from another Ukrainians, and it helps me to understand that it is not the end. We're still here, and we're still fighting.
Okay, happy end. Do, do, do.